all right. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Sex Here and Now. 2026, here we come. As always, I'm Matt Lockman. I'm a licensed clinical therapist and ASECT certified sex therapist. We are back, baby. We are motivated. We are ready to continue to talk about all things related to, sex and relationships. All right. So before we begin, I want to make a promise to all of you listeners out there. I, Matthew Lockman, promise to post at least 4 times a month if you, listener, share this podcast with your friends and do your part to really help continue to get it off the ground. I have been on and off of this podcast, I think, since 2019. All of my loyal friends, all of my loyal listeners, who are mostly my friends, would know. But yeah, I am feeling extra motivated again. You've probably heard me say that before, but our world needs sex positivity as much as it can these days. So I'm going to be bringing a lot more content, and I'm pumped to be sharing all of it with all of you. From guest interviews to talking about sexy topics like the one we will be exploring today, my goal has always been to promote sex positivity and inclusivity. That is why I started my practice, Cleveland Sex Therapy. That is why I started this podcast many, many moons ago. So with that, let's dive into the reason why all of you are here today. Heated Rivalry. The loves of my life are in that show. No, don't tell my fiance that. Um Now, I know I am months behind probably all of the content and edits and videos and podcasts talking about all things related to this amazing show and book series created by Rachel Reed. But I am, better late than never, I guess. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. Um, and I want to talk about it first as a fan, and then I'll talk a little bit about it as a sex therapist. But this show truly consumed my life, as it did many of my friends. Many of my friends, you know who you are out there, who became obsessed with these boys, like I did. But yeah, I think I'll first talk about it as a fan, and then move into why I wanted to make a whole podcast episode about this. So as always, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that this was a book series created by Rachel Reed. It was sort of it's essentially erotica. It's gay male romance. It was written through the lens of Rachel Reed and her skill set and how she writes books. So I personally have read most of these books at the time of this recording. I have read the first two, Game Changers and Heated Rivalry. And I skipped books 3 through 5. Sorry to all of you diehard readers out there, but I am really obsessed with Shane and Ilya. They are my favorites. So I skipped those books, and I'm currently in the middle of Game Changers, which was the last book in the series. But now it is not, because Rachel has announced that she's writing another book. I believe it's called Unrivaled. So can't wait to hear all about that and read all about that. But you know, I don't know about all of you. I mean, I do know this show just consumed the world. It it was amazing on so many levels, and I think one of the levels that relates to all of us is we can just witness good acting and good performing when we see it. And man, was that phenomenal acting. The way everyone in that show showed up and really said, I know what this assignment is and I'm going to slay it. They did. They surely did. Mostly every single episode, I would give 5 stars to. And the music was unreal. I don't know, as a millennial, it's rare that I watch a television show and then go and find the music associated with that television show. There's usually like one or two songs that I will Shazam, but I went and found the entire playlist and was just listening to it over and over again. I mean, Harrison's version of all the things she said, I I just I lost my shit. Now, you Gen Z listeners out there, you babies, you may have never heard of Tattoo before, but the original singers of that song, Tattoo, they promoted themselves. They came on the scene with the single All the Things She Said. I think I was in 6th grade. Don't quote me there. I was definitely a young gay boy in the closet listening to these two Russian women sing a love song to each other. We come to find out years later that they were faking, so we don't love them. But that song just taking off again, it was amazing to see. And that scene in general, wow. Episode 4 in general, episode 4, 5, and 6, just chef's kiss. So I could fangirl over this all day, every day. But I figured this is supposed to be somewhat of a sex related podcast. So I figured we'd talk a little bit about sex, this sex shown in the show, but then also what a show about two gay male hockey players basically has done for the queer community and has done for the representation of sex and queer sex on television. So, with that, I think I should share a little bit about my background. If you don't know, I I grew up an athlete. I traveled the country for tennis. I played tennis often. At one point, when I was 13 or 14, my parents sat me down and basically said, like, if you want to go pro, this is the time to do it. We will get you the coaches. And I don't know how I did it at 13 or 14, but I sort of knew my time wasn't gonna be well spent if I spent all my energy focusing on tennis. So, you know, I stepped away slightly. I played all throughout high school, all throughout college. After college, I taught it, I lived it. Um, I'm not saying I had a very similar experience to Ilya and Shane, but what I am saying is I was an athlete at, not a pro in my sport, but very good in my sport. It consumed my life. I lived it. I breathed it for a solid 10 years. Um, and there were no gay athletes that I could see. There were none at the time in tennis. There's Billie Jean King and Martina Navratilova and Renee Reynolds. Renee was a transgender trans woman who played, but there were none. And so I remember thinking, well, I can't really hide my queerness. I was pretty flamboyant, so I got made fun of all the time, constantly, by coaches, by my peers. And so I just remember thinking, and I remember being told by a coach too, you are never going to make it anywhere because there are no gay tennis players. So why do you think you're going to be any different? And so I laugh because if not, I'd cry. No, I laugh because it's just a wild thing to say. And he's also not wrong. Recently this year, I don't have his name off the top of my head. Last year, a professional tennis player came out who is gay, which is amazing, which is groundbreaking. And little kids get to see this, little queer boys like myself who didn't see any gay male tennis players get to see this. Unfortunately, he doesn't get shown a lot. He's not in the top 100, I don't think, yet. So not that that matters, but it matters, I guess, for him being shown on television screens on ESPN, because he will be entered into bigger tournaments and whatnot. Anywho, this is not a tennis podcast. What I'm saying is this can go such a long way, and I'm seeing it across platforms. I'm seeing it across social media, TikTok, Instagram, all these people basically saying this show has helped me come out to my teammates. This show has helped me get comfortable in my skin and come out as a young queer athlete. So I love that. I think that's amazing. And professional athletes recognizing it and saying this is such an amazing story, and some of them saying I wish I had this when I was playing. Again, never underestimate the power of representation and why it's so important to marginalized groups. Moving on to queer representation too, I've seen some discord from some queer people saying that, this isn't the true lived reality of queer people. This isn't how queer people have sex. And I gotta say, you are wrong. You're very wrong. Uh, as someone who is in the queer community, as someone who has studied queer theory, uh, who knows Vivian Cass's identity development model like the back of my hand, what I typically tell those people is that queer representation is needed in general, and not every single piece of queer media is going to represent every single piece of the queer community. Shouted from the rooftops. What did he say? Yes, I said not every piece of queer media, entertainment, TV show, music, book is going to represent every single piece or aspect of the queer community. So, yes, this aspect, two closeted, very masculine facing athletes engaging in sex and creating a love story and showing emotions and love and empathy and support for one another. That is queer relationships. So, again, like I said, do not underestimate the power of representation and what it can do for everyone in our society. So, why don't we talk a little bit about sex and, explore a little bit about why that show was pretty groundbreaking, continues to be groundbreaking, will forever be groundbreaking. So there have been depictions of gay sex on TV before. I mean, television shows, movies, all of that, right? I'm thinking of Queer as Folk. I'm thinking of The L Word. I'm thinking of really any show that has queer characters tends to show some queer sex, right? And what they'll show typically in those shows, they won't show like penises or genitalia, but they'll show butts, right? And they'll show just pounding and penetration and oral and like very quick and rough. And then it'll be done. And sure, that's fine. That some sex is like that. Some sex is very transactional. It's very performative. You are sort of showing up in a very specific way. And while there is some of that in Heated Rivalry, right? My fiance and I were talking about how the way they were depicting blowjobs was just absolutely I couldn't watch it. I am someone who gets secondhand embarrassment. Fun fact, I learned that if you are someone who gets secondhand embarrassment, aka when you're watching something on screen and you get embarrassed for that person, that is actually a sign that you have high levels of empathy. So, yes, all of you out there, do not feel ashamed about that. You probably are not a sociopath. So take that as a win. But what I'm trying to get at here is while there was some of that in Heated Rivalry, boy, I mean, did all of you just feel the love between Shane and Ilya, and also Scott and Kip? This is not going to be a Scott and Kip erasure podcast episode. Love Scott and Kip, but you know, most of the show was on Shane and Ilya. And when you watch them have sex, you were watching people who like loved each other. We don't get that in the queer community. I mean, we do like in some TV shows, but not a mainstream television show, right? Where you're watching two men be so emotional with each other, so vulnerable with each other, so in love with each other. It's truly remarkable, and it's so heartwarming. I remember watching Heartstopper, a Netflix show that is very different from Heated Rivalry, but feeling so similar in my thought that, wow, I'm so glad this exists because it's going to help a lot of teens out there. And at the same time, as I say that, it is not the representation of queer sex. It shows some queer romance from a very young age, but this shows two men. I mean, they start as young adults, 18, moving in to their 20s, to their adulthood, and loving each other, which again is not just like freaking, slabs of meat just smacking against each other. Although those scenes are pretty nice. I think too what's really good about this show that a lot of people may not have caught is that it does such a good job of displaying consent, right? And Jesus, if this is not something I preach about all the time, consent matters before, during, and after, right? So you're asking, is this something you like? Do you like me? Like, would you like me to continue? Do you want me to change anything? The amount of times Ilya checked in with Hollander, Shane, like amazing. It's such a good representation for everybody out there to see this is what you're supposed to do. You want to check in with the person you're having sex with throughout to make sure they're still enjoying it. You can see the playful chemistry that shows up. You can see the authenticity that shows up with these characters. You can see their fear. You can see all of these things that are typically depicted in straight media and straight television shows, but in a show that is very queer facing. So if you have not watched this show, I have no idea why you're listening to this episode. Just kidding. But if you haven't watched this show, you should. It's a great way to challenge yourself too, to especially if you are a male, a penis owner, and struggle with forms of internalized heterosexism or internalized homophobia. It's a phenomenal way for you to challenge that by watching this love story unfold. I recently wrote an article. I write articles for the Cleveland Scene. It's an independent magazine here in Cleveland, Ohio. They are published online weekly. Feel free to check them out. But I wrote an article basically on why women love gay male romance. And it's something that if they're straight women, right, that their partners should take note of. One of the key findings that I discovered in my research is that a big reason why women love these kinds of shows and why really they read these kinds of books is because they get to see men engaging in vulnerability, and they may not see that in their everyday lives. They may have partners who don't show vulnerability. They may have partners who engage in toxic masculinity. They may have partners who don't show emotions. So this right here is a way for them to get to see men engaging in that. They get to see them being vulnerable. They get to see men having fears and having anxieties around sex, some of the same anxieties that women may have. How am I showing up? Am I doing something right? Am I doing something wrong? Should I act this way? Should I look this way? They get to see that when two men are engaging on screen or on the page. Another one of the key findings that I discovered in researching that article was that women also get to feel a little bit safer in their skin because they're not the ones being sexualized in these television shows or novels. They get to see men being sexualized, right? The pressure is off of them. They don't have to worry about showing up and looking a certain way. Women have to carry so much pressure in our society these days to look a certain way and to act a certain way. One of my favorite actresses of all time, Jennifer Love Hewitt, has come out over the past few years and she said something so great that has stuck with me, which is, when I came on the scene in the 90s, I was expected to look and be the exact same for the rest of my life. I was supposed to not gain weight. I was supposed to continue to have this perfect body. And the fact that I got older and had kids, it was like I was betraying the world. And this always stands out to me when I think about the pressures that women and vulva owners experience when it comes to sex and when it comes to intimacy and when it comes to presenting themselves out into the world. The fact that makeup exists, that you can't just show up in your natural skin, but you have to put on makeup to be more presentable, to be more culturally appealing. It's, these pressures are something that a lot of penis owners don't have to deal with. So when they get to watch men sexualizing other men and they get to just sit back with no bra on, a red light mask on, and some flip-flops, no wonder they love this shit. So with that, I encourage all of you, if you have not seen the show or read the books or read anything on it, I encourage you to watch them and to read them or just look up scenes and see how this is depicted and why it became such a phenomenon. Okay, so while I could talk about this forever, I'm not going to because I know all of our attention spans are pretty short, and I think 20 minutes or around 20 minutes is probably enough time. But thank you for listening. Like I said, I promise I'm going to be posting more. So if I am holding up my end of the bargain, you have to hold up your end of the bargain by rating and reviewing and sharing this podcast with the world. Also, do not hesitate to reach out and let me know if there are any specific topics you want to cover. I know I have several that I'm going to be recording, but yeah, if there's anything specific, do not hesitate to reach out. And with that, I will ask you if you want to go to the cottage with me. And if not, that's okay. I respect that. And I will let you know that you will be hearing from me soon with another topic relating to the fun world of human sexuality and relationships. Until next time.